So I'm doing a Samaritan shift the other night and talked to about 5 or 6 people who were in addiction in a row. Really weird because that doesn't happen very often, but it was the overnight shift. So, this is at like 2, 3 in the morning. And there was just a really common theme because so many of them had so much self hatred going on. They had thoughts like, I'm so stupid. Why can't I stop? What is wrong with me? I deserve to feel terrible. This is just who I am. I've always been like this. I hate myself. One woman in particular really stood out because she was in her 70s and she just wouldn't stop going on about how much of a terrible person she was. She was talking about how much of an outsider she was. She was talking about how she's always been like this and just went on and on and on. All this self deprecation. And this is very common in addiction. I had it myself, when I was in the porn addiction, so often I would feel absolutely terrible and I'd just be criticizing myself non-stop. And don't get me wrong, addiction is really difficult. I've been through it. It is. But what's really important to understand is it's not actually about who you fundamentally are. You've got addicted neural pathways, and we'll talk about that very soon as well. So you can actually change because you can change these addictive neural pathways. So you can change your brain due to neuroplasticity. So it's not about who you are. It's really just about what you're doing right now. And it's about the state of your brain and the level of your thinking. So what we can do is understand the addicted part of our mind, and this will really, really help us go beyond compulsion, go beyond the addiction, and gain permanent mental freedom. So I want to share how you can better understand the addicted part of your mind so you can get out of these self-deprecating thoughts, which are often actually causing the addiction, and I'll be explaining that very shortly. But first of all, I want to talk a little bit about internal family systems, because this is the route I originally went down. I really got into IFS. This was created by Richard Schwartz, who was working with people who had all kinds of issues many years ago. And he basically realized that there was a lot of self-hate going on. And I remember he was sharing how he had one patient who would come in, and I think she had some cuts on her arms, and he would tell her, you can't do that, and would really hammer home the point of all the sort of consequences, and felt like he had had like a really productive therapy session with this woman. And then she comes back for another therapy session like a week later, and she had like a big cut on her face, and things had just got way worse. I believe that's probably due to deprivation thinking. I'm not going to go into that too much, but he actually came up with this model called internal family systems, and I've used it a fair bit myself, found it very useful in a few ways. And essentially how it works is, what he talks about is you have these exiled parts. So something happens in childhood or some kind of trauma happens throughout your life, and you have this part of you which gets exiled. It's like you never want to go into that part. It's like it's another part of you. Maybe for me, when I'm younger, I remember feeling a lot of sort of shame around being circumcised, because that's very rare. Where I grew up, I was like the only Jewish kid at school. And so there was like this part of me that felt some shame around that. And I just like never shared it. It was like this private, secretive part, and just kept it really deep inside of myself. But if any sort of topic would come up around that, it's like this exiled part would come out, and I'd sort of feel very, very scared and a lot of shame, I suppose. So the manager part would kind of keep me safe, keep everything in order, maybe hide the fact that I was Jewish from certain people. But then what the firefighter part would do is, if maybe that sort of secret came out and this exiled part sort of came alive a little bit within me, the firefighter part would help me get away from that emotional shame, that pain as much as possible, and I would just drift off into porn entirely. And what actually happened with these exiled parts is it'd be the feeling that may have originally been shame for me, that could actually come up in different ways. Maybe I'm feeling like an outsider at football, and then the feelings that I was an outsider at school when I was like 7 would come up, and then what would happen is the firefighter part would, lead me to porn to sort of escape that emotional pain. But what you really want to do with, these 3 different parts, the exiles, the managers, the firefighters, is try and make peace with them all, instead of criticizing them and going in this inner battle with them and having all this self-hatred and whatnot. Instead, you want to sort of have this peace where they're actually all on the same team, and then what you have is self-energy, which is defined by the 7 C's. And I don't know if I can still remember the 7 C's, but it's something like clarity and compassion and creativity and curiosity and connectedness and confidence, maybe calm as well. I think they may be the 7 C's. So maybe I've just nailed it. I'm not sure, but I'll look into that after I've watched this video. Anyway, that's a bit about internal family systems. But I used this for a little while, and it kind of helped me do a lot of inner healing work. But it wasn't until I actually met Mary Paulus and learned the Beyond Compulsion method that I was able to really change my brain and overcome porn addiction, because I did that through tapping into addictive neural pathways, thinking it through, changing those pathways, and due to neuroplasticity, I was able to change my behaviour. And here's the thing. The reason people want to engage in their compulsive behaviour is because they've become involved in a psychological, emotional dependency on a mind, mood altering experience. A lot of people are going to go back into the trauma, look at those exiled parts, and really try and delve into their past. But once you're addicted, and don't get me wrong, that addiction may have formed because of that trauma and what's happened in the past, but once you are addicted, those neural pathways have changed. There's a new brain map that's been formed, and so now you are involved in the psychological, emotional dependency on a mind, mood altering experience. So what we really need to understand is that the addicted part of the mind, once you're in this emotional, psychological dependency, once you're in it, the addicted part of the mind is going to do whatever it possibly can to try and get you to engage in that compulsive behaviour, because it's going to continue wanting to engage in the compulsive behaviour, because that's just how the brain is now wired. And when we understand that, what we can actually realise and look at from a different angle is that all of this self-hatred is happening for one specific reason. The reason that you are hating yourself so much and having all these self-deprecating thoughts when you're in an addiction is because the self-hatred is there to keep you stuck in the addiction. How does this work? Well, let's say you say to yourself, I am a failure. What does that lead to? It leads to the thought that you're never going to sort of get free of the addiction. It leads to the thought of, you're not worthy. You don't have the self-love. You don't have the respect for yourself to get out of the addiction. You're going to feel pretty horrible. You're going to tell yourself that I'm an idiot, I'm stupid, I deserve to be in the addiction. And I remember one call at Samaritans the other night, and she was in a really, really deep addiction, actually, with a abusive relationship, abusive partner. And oh my god, like the stuff she told me about herself, like, oh, it was horrible, because she would share to me how much she basically hated herself, and there is no way she would put up with the shit that she was in, the stuff her partner was doing to her, disgusting stuff. There's no way she would have put up with any of that if she didn't have all this self-hatred and frustration and just real sort of pain inside of herself, all towards herself. I believe that the reason that she was in that relationship and stuck in an addiction is because of all that sort of self-hatred. I think that self-hatred comes from the addiction though. So the brain gets wired in a certain way, you get involved in the psychological, emotional dependency, you start to hate yourself, and then that hatred towards yourself leads to hating yourself even more and getting deeper into the addiction. I hope that makes sense a bit. The main thing to take away from this video is that if you're in an addiction and you're having a lot of self-hatred, realise that is the addicted part of the mind causing you that self-hatred so that you stay stuck in the addiction. Hopefully that makes some sense. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.